All right, well, joining me live now is Shadow Infrastructure and Transport Minister Bridget McKenzie. How are you?
Well, it's early, Andrew, but look, the Nats had a great night. You know, we've picked up 2 seats in Geraldton. We've won back Warren Blackwood, which was the former leader, Terry Redmond's seat. Transitioned Central Wheatbelt, so a good night all round for
And that's
the Nats.
a former staff member of yours that won Central Wheatbelt, as I understand it.
Young Lachlan Hunter, as we like to say, took over from Mia Davies, and she goes on to fight the seat of Bullwinkle at the upcoming federal election.
There was a feature of it was this Nationals Liberal sort of bun fight here.
We're
going to see that in Bullwinkle as well, though, aren't we? Can that get in the way?
No, what we're doing, you know, that's across the country. We have 3-corner contests in Victoria whenever we transition a seat. 3-corner contest in Bendigo, for instance, against Lisa Chester's. And you'll see that again in Bullwinkle. I think when we looked at last night at those results, particularly from state seats like Kalamunda, where we had a strong National Party presence, supported by local law-abiding firearm owners. You know, hopefully Kalamunda can come back for the coalition, but it bodes well for those swings in those outer suburban seat, working families who really have been left behind by an East Coast Labor, not just on the East Coast, but here.
Roger Cook smashed it though, didn't he? I mean, when you get 58% of the two-party preferred vote.
Like, this is Roger Cook's win, a very popular Premier who chose to lock the Prime Minister out.
Well, the Prime Minister was due to come in the last couple of days until the cyclone.
I think Premier Cook was very, very glad that Prime Minister who has actually not had WA's best interest at heart when you look at the live sheep export ban, when you look at nature positive laws, when you look at unions back into the Pilbara, on any measure, when you come to the resources state, they don't want to see that type of legislation. Roger Cook's been fighting East Coast Labor as much as we have.
What seats do you think are winnable for the federal coalition?
I think there were some really promising swings in seats like Hasluck, in seats like Cowan, in seats like Pearce. I think Bullwinkle, as I said, with Kalamunda and others, had some really good swings. Now, these are typical, of inverted commas, safe red seats, but they're the same type of Australians who voted no at The Voice, who actually want to see a Prime Minister who can stand up to our enemies. I mean, this, you know, we've just been circumnavigated by China and Chinese gunboats, and the West did not take kindly to that. So they like their leaders to be strong and emphatic over here, doers, and they don't find that in Anthony Albanese. I think Bullwinkle is looking promising for the coalition as well.
Can I get your reaction to this ADF accident?
Well, obviously, we hope that everybody makes a very speedy recovery. It's great that local emergency services, the AMBOs, were out there in force to make sure everybody got back to receive medical treatment as quickly as possible. And obviously the ADF, as a former emergency management minister during the Lismore floods, the ADF doing a wonderful job in helping communities recover from natural disasters. So we wish them all the best.
There was a kerfuffle during the week when Perrin Davey didn't rule out cuts to the National Emergency Authority as part of your planned public service cuts. Can you rule that out this morning?
We have been emphatic, Andrew. There won't be any cuts to frontline services in the 36,000 additional public servants that the Labor Party's chosen to put on the books.
How do you define that, though?
Well, that's going to be the work of government, right? We need to make sure what we've seen in the public service is productivity go down. You're working from home because your dog or your cat's got anxiety because you've left the house. That is seriously what's happening. We found public servants travelling around in their caravan working from home.
All right.
That's got to stop.
That's not acceptable, but a lot of women won't like this, right? You know, to be blunt about it.
That's very sexist, Andrew. I would hope that there's a lot of dads looking after their kids as well.
That is true too. But I'm saying that the work from home policy is very popular with women in particular. And you know, do you risk alienating that vote by being so stridently against work from home?
Well, what we've been really clear about is there's no breaches to the Fair Work Act here. We've got an enterprise agreement in place. There will be agreements already with managers around work from home arrangements and flexibility around caring and the like. Those will remain in place, but we're not going to actually, we want the public service to service the public. The productivity problem in this country isn't just with small business and mining approvals, it's actually in our public service, and we believe we can make some gains on behalf of the Australian public.
Do you think it's more generally because of work from home? The productivity issue, well, including in the private sector?
The research is really clear around that. Now, Labor wanted to make this about women working from home, classic, and Danielle Wood's remarks. The research is also clear that when you don't go into the office and collaborate and compete against your peers in the workplace, the productivity does fall. That is also true. And we want to see the most productive and efficient and forward-focused public service that we can on behalf of the Australian people.
What's your fear in terms of the ex-tropical cyclone in the next few days?
Well, I think the flooding event will be significant, and that's been widely reported. We know that Queensland in particular is very good at handling natural disasters. We've seen that in the past, irrespective of which party is in government, they have to deal with them in and out. And I think New South Wales has learnt a lot since the Lismore and Northern Rivers catastrophe a few years ago. So hopefully we've got everyone pre-positioned and we're going about it. Disappointing that the app wasn't up and running, that was meant to let everybody know about natural disasters in a timely fashion, but let's get on with it. All in.
Peter Dutton copped some stick for going to a fundraiser in Sydney as cyclone preparations were underway.
Seriously.
I hear you groaning.
Yeah,
with the question.
like honestly.
Well, what's your take on that?
Tuesday. I mean, the reality is he'd gone around to see his aunt, made sure his elderly aunt was okay, secured his own home, fulfilled his obligations within the diary. We made sure he was home in his home state with his community to see them through what ended up being a low pressure trough, and a heavy rain event. So I think it really says more about the Labor Party and how desperate they are to smear Peter Dutton and go personal. And it's just pathetic.
Did they put that?
Politics.
They put that story out, in your opinion?
Have you seen Murray Watt? Have you had him on, Andrew?
Can't say I have.
Oh, well, honestly, the guy's like the head kicker personified, and he just, we're not going to politicise the natural disaster. Politicise the natural disaster. And I remember trying to actually assist communities in a 1 in 100 year flood event, and all he could do as the shadow emergency management minister was criticise both state and federal government's response. So please.
All right, you're a Murray Watt fan then. How do you think holding a budget in a May election will affect the opposition's prospects?
Well, I think it will give our candidates more time on the ground meeting voters. And I think what you've seen from this state election, and I think it's increasingly so, restoring trust with the Australian public more broadly, it's all 101. Politics is about people, and that is about actually connecting. And so the longer we have to do that, I think the better. We've been wanting to go back to the budget week anyway. It will actually draw back the Harry Potter invisibility cloak off the actual figures. The books will be open for public scrutiny, and I don't think they're going to be good for Labor. And that'll be a good thing, because we are to have an actual debate about the failure of this government on economic management into the long term and how the Australian public have been suffering as a result. You heard Patrick earlier, it's all international factors. Sorry, Patrick. Michelle Bullock's made that pretty clear. It's state and federal government spending.
I hear there's some big policy that you've got, but that you're basically hanging on to it to closer to election day.
Well, lucky we did.
What's the thinking? Yeah, but what's the thinking behind that? Don't you need a couple of months to sell whatever you're doing?
Well, what we need to do is make sure our candidates are out there putting the proposition of getting our country back on track. Our housing package, we've announced really significant components of that, and that is one of the top 3 issues for Australians, making sure small business knows that we've got their back as well. And so the nuclear energy policy, I think that's really visionary, and I'm really excited to hopefully be part of a generation that's going to secure our energy mix, not just to 2050, but to next century, which is what our plan's all about, and keeping those jobs on shore. So I think our candidates have got what they need now, and then we'll have a suite of policy announcements across all portfolios for our positive plan.
Angus Taylor appeared to contradict Peter Dutton during the week when he said there was no plan to break up the insurance companies, that it would never happen. What's the opposition position on this?
Well, we've been really, really clear. We're on the side of Australian small businesses and the Australian consumers. We're the only side of politics that actually has a policy on competition laws. We've put a divestiture policy out there for supermarkets. We will always be on the side of the consumer and Australian small business instead of the Labor Party, who seems to be backing big business, big unions, big government. I mean, Australians have had enough. And, you know, you even don't have to look further than the aviation sector, where they've continued to back Qantas. We've seen 2 regional airlines go bust in their time, and prices go through the roof for the Australian traveller.
Well, they're taking over Rex and they're ticking off on the Virgin Qatar deal. So isn't that sort of, not that great for Qantas?
Australians have been paying much more than they needed to for the last 3 years for domestic and international aviation services. And when you say they've ticked off on Rex, they haven't ticked off on Rex. Rex went bust more than 7 months ago, and we still don't have any clarity on what the government's plan is.
What about Virgin Qatar, though? Is that something you support?
Oh, slow clap for Labor. Like, honestly, 18 months ago, we could have had Qatar running and competing against the Emirates and Qantas international flights.
They took too long.
We know prices would have dropped.
Is what you're saying.
But, Andrew, they've had to purchase 25% of Virgin to actually get that to happen. So, I mean, you know, fair's fair. These guys can't make a decision to save themselves.
The deadline's looming on whether Australia gets a tariff exemption on steel from Donald Trump. I'm told again this morning that deep talks are still going on now. What do you think will happen here?
Well, I don't think calling the Vice President of America a knob, whilst the Chinese are circumnavigating and just off the coast here in WA, was the best strategy. I mean, you've got not just, that was the Premier Cook.
Yeah, that wasn't.
Then you've got the Prime Minister.
That wasn't anyone from the federal government, yeah.
No, but America doesn't look at it like this is our most important ally. The coalition was able to secure an exemption when we were in government, when this last came up. But it was all based on relationships. You've got an ambassador that's trash talk President Trump. You've got a Prime Minister who said he's scared. Foreign Affairs Minister whose language was also pretty loose in the past about current President Trump. And then you've had the Premier's comments.
Donald Trump and Anthony Albanese got on all right in their phone calls.
We don't need juvenile responses with our most important ally at a serious geostrategic moment.
What's your bet on this, on the steel tariffs?
It's not looking good. I mean, that is the test for Labor. Can you actually secure this tariff? I was in Gladstone earlier last week, where you've got the aluminium refinery and the smelter there for aluminium. We need to make sure that those jobs in an industrial heart like Gladstone are able to be kept on shore, because if they don't get this exemption, they're gone.
Bridget McKenzie, thanks so much.
Always a pleasure, Andrew.